So, Member Mack, could you please give us some kind of a picture of why you felt that it needed to come down at this point in time, and maybe you have Mary's sentiments as well.
I can't speak for Mary.
Yeah, nobody could.
Hey, can everyone see that okay? Charter government, I firmly believe, from a legal and policy perspective, is frankly a no-brainer for the city of Canton. And just with this brief PowerPoint, I will try to articulate why I feel that way, why I sponsor the communication, and why I think the time is now to sign this out of committee, have a vote on council floor, and ultimately put this before the voters of the city of Canton. So what is a charter? Is, I think, probably the first place to start when discussing this issue. And it's essentially a constitution for a city. It's the basic framework that a municipality must follow in its operation, governing the citizens that it's elected its leaders. One point I think that it's very important to make is that a charter, a good charter, does not attempt to identify and cure every administrative issue that a city may have. Just like our federal constitution doesn't try to identify and cure every issue that may affect the citizens of the United States, so does a good functioning city charter. And it leaves a great deal of policymaking power to council and gives them flexibility in meeting the needs of the municipality as they may arise. Now, those aren't Edmund Mack's words, those are the words of the Ohio Municipal League, which is probably the foremost, definitely the foremost authority on municipal legal issues. And so, what is that then contrasted with what the city of Canton has? I'm sure everyone in this room knows by now that the city of Canton is actually a statutory city. Our legal framework is defined by the city of Columbus, or by the Ohio General Assembly, rather, in the city of Columbus. And if we want to make changes to the framework that governs what we do, we have to hope that Columbus changes them for us. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, because when the Ohio General Assembly makes a change, not only do they have to be willing to apply that change to Canton, but to every municipality that has a charter. And so when you want to change the framework that governs the city of Canton, it's actually a very, very daunting task to try to go that route and to have the General Assembly actually amend the statutes. And again, in the words of the Ohio Municipal League, the statutory plans are inflexible. They cannot be adjusted for the size of the city or tailored due to a city's particular economic needs, social climate, or political needs. You're really stuck with what the General Assembly is given. So when we look at what do other cities do, 73% of all cities in the state of Ohio have already done this, have already done what we here are discussing during our committee meeting. 7 out of the 10 largest cities in the state of Ohio have already done this. And why is that? It's because a charter government fundamentally gives the citizens more local autonomy and more flexibility to deal with the unique needs of a particular community. So what are the advantages? They are certainly flexibility and local control. In the words of the Ohio Municipal League, the charters may be drafted to strengthen the democratic process and give more efficient government than is available under the statutory form. You don't need the General Assembly to approve what you're doing. The voters make those approval on their own. But instead of talking generalities, specifically, how can a charter be better? Specifically, what are some of the improvements that a charter, a properly drawn charter, can enact on behalf of the citizens of Canton? And I think that's the threshold issue that Chairman Weston is driving at. The changes are literally limited only by your imagination. You can, for instance, have a dramatic change, replace our mayor with an unelected city manager that's appointed by council. That's an available change under the charter form of government. You can go the other direction. You can consolidate power in the position of the mayor. One example is to eliminate the need for us as a body to approve who the mayor puts on commissions, who serves on the different boards in the city of Canton, and essentially turn over the reins of the city of Canton to the mayor's office. You can even do more structural changes in the city of Canton, one that we often hear a lot about is combining the auditor's office with the treasurer's office. Those are all available under a charter form of government. All fundamentally changes the way Canton would look, but all something that we can undertake. But what's important to me, and why I think that this is, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, a no-brainer, is the subtle, efficient changes that can be done with a charter that you can't do with the statutory form of government to make Canton better. And one of those changes, which is certainly one that I care a lot about, is actually strengthening the democratic process. Councils of non-charter municipalities presently do not have the power to submit ordinances to a vote on their own initiative, except for tax levies, bond issues, or other statutorily authorized mechanisms. Under a charter, such a procedure can be authorized. And so if we want to have the public weigh in on traffic laws, if we want to have the public weigh in on an animal control officer, a charter can allow that to happen. Now, there's certain specific statutory mechanisms where that can happen now, such as reducing the size of council or expanding the terms from 2 years to 4 years. But unless it's specifically statutorily authorized, that cannot be done. That's one efficient, simple, and effective change that brings the city of Canton, the voters of the city of Canton, into the democratic process. And I think it's a great change. There's other certain changes that you can make that aren't nearly as drastic as the change that I displayed a few moments ago. You can liberalize or restrict tax and debt limitations. You want to authorize the city to have the ability to incur more debt, or the other way around, less debt, that's something that you can do with the charter. You can actually even streamline council meetings. Anyone who's been here before, and I'm sure almost all of you have, here are all the archaic things that we have to go through, suspending this, suspending that. That entire process can be streamlined so we focus less on the archaic, rigorous rules and more on actually governing, hearing the constituents' issues as we're engaging in our city council meeting. So when we talk about the type of changes as to why I supported this legislation, why I do, and why I think it's a great idea, these are the type of changes that would make the city better and that would ultimately make the public leaders more responsive and reflective of the people that elected us. So then what's holding us back? This is such a great idea. What's the roadblock? Why aren't we going through this process? It lies, as far as I can tell, and what I've read, in the actual composition of the Charter Commission. In order to engage in this process, we have to elect, as citizens of Canton, a 15-member Charter Commission who would be charged with the duties of drafting a charter. This is not anything that we can change. This is ingrained in the Ohio Constitution. Every other 73% of the cities in the state of Ohio have done this. And if we want to make this good government available to the city of Canton, we have to do the same thing. The members would serve without pay, and ultimately, and I think what's a very, very important point, their end product would have to be approved by the electors of the city of Canton. The Charter Commission doesn't have the right, it's not bestowed upon them to dictate what our form of charter government would be. The voters of the city of Canton ultimately make that decision. So what else is holding us back? Well, what happens if some of those changes that I talked about before The mayor's office is now ordained to the city of council, to the Canton City Council, and we decide who the mayor is. Or if something like the auditor's and treasurer's office is combined and all of our friends lose their jobs. That's not something that's very likely to happen. And I think that if we look at what happened in 1962, the last time a charter was drafted and put before the citizens of Canton, it failed. And it failed by 71% to 39%. And why is that? 29%. Sorry about that. It's because it made sweeping changes to Canton City government. All of the council members were no longer ward council members. They were all at large. And it reduced the size of Canton City Council. On the surface, that may seem pretty unimportant. Well, I mean, council members are still there. But one thing that 1962 election confirmed was that the voters of the city of Canton care about their ward representation. I think it's safe to say the city voters now, if the charter commission were adopted, would not approve a charter that made wholesale changes to city government, because the city of Canton knows what they want and they like how they're represented now. But that's not to say we can't make the process better, we can't make the process streamlined, and we can't make the process more responsive to the citizens' needs. So what else is holding us back? There's fears that we've read about that a charter commission would draft a charter that treats people unequally. Certain classes of people are going to be treated different than other classes, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's racial, or whether it's geographical. This charter commission is going to skew our city government to favor one class of citizens over another. And I think there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever to support that view. And I think the threshold issue that you have to get your minds around when actually considering that possibility, how could that even be accomplished? How could a charter government legally engraft a discriminatory intent into Canton's law? What would that even look like? Are the citizens who live in Frank's neighborhood no longer allowed to vote? Or are all public funds going to have to be directed to John's neighborhood? And I think when you really think about the issue and you think critically about it, I think it's the fears aren't realistic. And I think a good example is the city of Columbus. The city of Columbus, if you look at the demographics of the city of Columbus, it's 68% white and 32% of the city are a minority. But when you actually look at the composition of the city of Columbus, which is a charter government, the majority members of the city of council of the city of Columbus are in fact of a minority. And I think the notion that a charter is going to lead to unequal treatment, if it's not supported by any evidence that I've ever seen, it's disproven by what has actually happened in reality. We've heard about a fear with the charter government of North versus South. People, purportedly, who live in the North or more economically suited, as opposed to people who live in the southern part of the city. Again, it's difficult to conceive how a charter could somehow favor the northern part of the city to the detriment of the southern part of the city. But I think more to the point, we trust the entirety of the city to elect our council persons at large. Why would we not trust the entirety of the city to elect our charter commission? We hear a lot about education, and to be quite frank, I think it's a delay factor. I think that when you look at the actual facts, charter government has been debated in the city of Canton for years. Most recently in 2010 and 2011. There have been 4 public meetings discussing this issue. And there have been over 25 articles in the public record discussing charter government, explaining charter government, laying out the possible changes, laying out the possible drawbacks, and laying out the process. If a voter wants to be informed, the information is certainly there. And to be frank, if you feel, any member of this council, that your specific constituency is not informed on this issue, get out there and do your job and inform them. Because the tools are there, the information is there, and the only thing that's holding us back on this issue is ourselves. I started my remarks by indicating this is in fact a no-brainer, and I believe it is. The expert on Ohio municipal law, Attorney John Gotherman, remarked, statutory planned cities would be better off if they adopted a charter, even if they don't change any part of their governmental structure. So if you make no changes in the city of Canton to our current statutory form, embed that in a charter, we are still much farther ahead than what we currently have. The cities that have not adopted a charter are missing out on the ability to have local autonomy. Now again, these aren't my words. These are the words of the foremost expert in this area. As I've indicated previously, it's highly unlikely that the voters are going to approve some kind of radical charter. Second, there's no evidence whatsoever that any charter that's formed by a commission and ultimately approved by the city of Canton is going to somehow have a discriminatory effect. The fact of the matter is we've been debating this for years. The time is now. Let the voters decide this issue. I'll certainly be happy to answer any questions that you have.
One quick question, if you will. Is there something specific that you want to see out of charter government here? Because these were like hypotheticals of what we could do. But when you sent this forward, is there something specific that you would like to see Canton City adopt in their charter government?
In order to make changes, you have to put the mechanism in place. The first step to making Canton more responsive to the voters is first giving the citizens tools. That tool is a charter. So in terms of specific changes, I think that any change, certainly a dramatic change like what I talked about earlier, we have to have studies, we have to have potentially consultants, if you're looking at a cost-saving measure like combining the auditors or the treasurer's office. But we don't even get that far. This issue isn't contingent upon specific changes. This issue is about giving the citizens the tool to make changes possible. And that's exactly what we're doing if we vote to approve charter government on the ballot and form a commission. Now there's changes certainly I'd like to see, Edmund Mack sitting here would like to see. I would like to see the ability of us as a council to submit ordinances for approval by the municipality.
The voters.
The voters. That's putting the cart before the horse. The first thing you have to do is give the people the tools and then allow the process to take place.
You used the framework of a nuisance ordinance or the traffic cameras. If we wanted to bring that before the voters, you're saying we could not put that on the ballot as under statutory city?
I mean, these aren't my words. This is in the opinion of the Ohio Municipal League. So the view of the Ohio Municipal League is this: unless it's a bond issue, tax issue, or if it's something that's specifically authorized by statute,
Right.
changing the council terms, we don't have the mechanism to do that.